Data mines are always on the horizon in Marvel Snap, and today we got a humongous one because all of the Spotlight cards until the end of September have been leaked. Of course, worth noting, any data mines are subject to change, but it's very, 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 very likely that these will be the cards we see in the Spotlight caches in the month of September. We're also going to take a quick gander at the rest of the Spotlight cards available in August, so you can make the most informed decision possible on how to be opening your Spotlight caches. We've got two top tips though for Spotlight caches. The first one is you usually want to be hoarding them and targeting a specific week where there's a bunch of rewards or a specific reward that you really want, rather than just opening them when you get them. You're not going to be guaranteed to get the card that you want, whereas if you just open all four in a certain week, you're going to be getting all four rewards available guaranteed. The other top tip is to prioritize spending your tokens on Series 4 cards. That's because in a set like this, where we can see Thanos, Tribunal, Jean Grey, and Null. Null is Series 4, the rest is Series 5, but it's still going to be a 25% chance for each of them. So you're just better off spending those 3,000 tokens on those Series 4 cards and then trying to get the Series 5 cards in the Spotlight caches. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. The first one is the current week, and I do want to skim through these. Lady Deathstroke, I think avoid. She's an okay card. She's Series 5, so she costs 6,000. Modok and Stature are really, really good though, I have to say. If you don't own Modok and Stature, they are only Series 4 though, so I think that you could just spend your tokens on them and save your Spotlight caches this week, in my opinion, because the week after, next week, is an absolute juicer. So I would hoard. It's okay, none of these cards are bad, but two Series 4 cards, again, that's what I talk about. You really want to be prioritizing spending tokens on these kinds of guys. If you're wondering for a Lady Deathstrike deck, because she's new, Cerebro 3. We'll talk more about this deck a bit later with Rivona. Up next, we have X23. This is for the next week, August 22nd to 29th. There's also Nebula, Series 5, Silk, Series 5, and of course that one random Series 4 or 5 card as well, which is always included in these. X23 is going in Series 5. She's 1 energy, 2 power. When this is discarded or destroyed, regenerate it. We have that word with Wolverine at a random location, and you get +1 energy next turn. This card is cracked. This card's insane. Think about this card in discard. It's like a Wolverine, but good. Okay, you get less points, but you get extra energy later on. You could then maybe do some kind of discard or destroy hybrid. Of course, you could just play it in destroy. So it looks like a really, really exciting card. There's also a little bit of Lady Deathstrike synergy there as well, which is worth mentioning. This card's great, but moreover, Nebula and Silk are going to cost you 6,000 tokens, or just open 4 Spotlight caches this week, be guaranteed Silk, Nebula, X23, and another card. That is what you want to be doing with your Spotlight caches. So I would absolutely, if you don't own Nebula, don't own Silk, be opening all of these and at least getting the X23, the Nebula, and the Silk. So you could get that after 3, but most likely you're going to get that random Series 4, 5 card. So you're going to have to open all 4, most likely. Highly recommended that you get Nebula, Silk, and X23. I think they're all really good cards. Up next, we are going to take a look at the final card of the month, which is Silver Samurai. This card's not as good in my opinion. It's also going into Series 5. The interesting thing in this one, Spider-Man 2099 Series 4, pretty terrible card in my opinion. No one plays it, so that's a big downside, but Kitty Pryde is a huge upside. The thing is, a lot of people got this card for free. Most people do have Kitty Pryde for free, and therefore I don't really think that this is going to be appealing to the vast majority of players. I also don't think Silver Samurai is particularly good. This is a massive skip in my opinion. The one exception is if you're one of the few people watching this video that doesn't own Kitty Pryde, you could seriously consider targeting this card because it is very, very good. And Silver Samurai looks like fun. I love this card. How does it slot in? Well, I would just say you just literally slot into a discard deck. I've got X23 in here as well. Usually I would play Nebula in this spot, and usually I would play Absorbing Man or something along those kinds of lines. So this deck looks pretty flipping good. Actually, discard is performing a lot better than people realize in the current meta with the introduction of Daken, and then Silver Samurai and X23 also giving it a little bit of sauce potentially. I think it's a really exciting deck and could surprise a few people. So Silver Samurai is okay. This could absolutely be replaced. This is like the worst card in the deck, I think. Being able to discard a card from your opponent, pretty cool. All right, moving on to the data mines. Big shout out to my friend Drewberry Snap for these graphics that he's done here. He does a bunch of videos on Datamined cards. His YouTube channel is going to be in the description below. Really lovely chap, great content creator, highly recommended. And thanks for the graphic that I've shamelessly robbed. So the first week of September, remember, is a little bit different because while we're seeing Loki here, Loki is the Battle Pass card, which means Loki isn't actually going to be in the mix for these. So we've got 3 cards plus that one random 25% chance of a Series 4 or 5 card. So Jeff is in the mix. If you don't have Jeff, you want to buy Jeff. Let's be honest. You don't want to spend 6,000 tokens on him. This is finally a time you've been waiting. So if you don't have Jeff, open. If you don't have Ghost Spider, I would also highly recommend going for it as well. I think Ghost Spider is an extraordinarily powerful card. She is now 1 energy, 2 power. She is really, really good in my opinion. So I would definitely suggest going for it. I think it's really good value if you don't own her. Null is only going to cost you 3,000 tokens. So I would probably recommend spending tokens on Null if you're really after him rather than just opening these caches for it. So overall, this is a really good week. If you don't own Jeff, you don't own Ghost Spider. I own all 3 of these cards. So of course, I am going to be skipping, as tempting as these variants are. I'm not really that interested in variants. I want the card collection. That's all I care about. Up next, in September 12th to 18th, we have an interesting week because we have Elias, who is, by many accounts, the most hyped up Datamined card for the month of September. It's a 6 energy card with 5 power. On reveal, destroy all enemy cards played here this turn, including unrevealed cards. This is only the 2nd card in Marvel Snap, I believe, which can destroy unrevealed cards. Can you think of the other one? I'll give you a little second. It's Kingpin. Kingpin can also destroy unrevealed cards. So Elias is pretty hyped up by the community. We're going to look at a couple of decks with Elias in just a moment, but what are the other 2 cards on offer? Well, there's Hitmonkey, Series 5 rather. It did get nerfed, of course, a little while ago, and it was a significant nerf, I have to say. Hitmonkey, pretty mid, in my opinion. Definitely not a card you should worry about not having if you don't. It's nowhere near as good as it used to be at 0 stats and 2 energy because, of course, a lot of these Hitmonkey decks play Bast. So I'm not too hyped on Hitmonkey. I give it like a 5 out of 10. Snowguard is completely awful. Abysmal card. Maybe the worst in the game. However, by the time that September 12th comes around, surely Snowguard will have got a rework. So, is this a good one to target? I think Elias, it really depends on if you like the look of Elias. Now, let's then talk about what the decks are for this, because I do think I'm going to be tempted to go for Elias, but maybe this is like an exception where you could just spend the 6k. I already own Hitmonkey. I don't own Snowguard, so I could open 3 caches and be guaranteed to get it. I'm probably going to go for this one. I have a feeling, but I'm a little bit on the fence. I do think the card is just really, really interesting, though. So here's a couple of decks you can use with it. The first one is a ramp deck. There's a couple of reasons for that. One thing is you can play Elias on turn 5 and then Zola it on turn 6, moving it to the 2 other locations. Remember, it destroys all enemy cards played here this turn. So that's wiping out 2 out of 3 cards that your opponent played. Like, if they play it into the 2 locations your Elias moves into, any of those cards get destroyed, and you're putting stats into those locations. So that has potential. But the other really interesting thing you can do with this one is you can play Galactus on 5, and then Elias is just winning you the game, right? Like, you play your Galactus, and then if your Galactus goes through, Elias is winning you turn number 6, because your opponent, whatever they play, gets destroyed. So there's some interesting Elias Galactus synergy. Good chance that this Electro deck is a little bit too top heavy, like maybe Doctor Doom needs to, or Black Panther needs to go from this one for something slightly cheaper, but you get the general idea. The other one, which is honestly even more interesting to me, is the idea of playing Elias in a lockdown deck. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could go about doing this. This is just based on a list that I shared on my YouTube channel a couple of days ago. The idea is, let's say you storm on 3, you Professor X a location on 5, one of those 2 things, and then on turn 6 you play your Elias to just win the other location, right? If that 5 points is getting you ahead in that location, anything they play there is going to get destroyed. So as long as they don't have a way of adding points into that location with something like an Ironheart, a Silver Surfer, a Claw, you're going to be winning. So Storm and Elias have big synergy, as well as Daredevil, Professor X, and Elias. So I think it's a really good card, I have to say. I think that this is one that you do probably want to try and get. You could consider biting the bullet and spending 6,000 tokens on Elias. However, if you own Hitmonkey, Snowguard, go for the go for the caches, I think. All right, up next we have Rivona, and I have to say Rivona is looking really bad. 3 energy, 3 stats, ongoing. Your cards with 1 or less power cost 1 less. Yeah, there's not really much you can do with her, to be honest. The main thing I thought of was Cerebro 3, but like if you play Bast and buff up your Iron Man, your Mystique, and your Cerebro to 3, then she's doing very, very little. Lady Deathstroke, by the way, really good in Cerebro 3. I think that's the deck she's going to be best in. But I just don't think Rivona's really offering much. Like, I think this card is really, really bad. I just don't see any use for her right now. Let me know in the comments if there's any spicy decks you can think of with Rivona that I'm not thinking of. But I think she's just bad. I would avoid. However, the other 2 cards in here are more interesting. Zabu is a great card, but surely at this point you've already spent 3,000 tokens on him. If you really want Zabu that much, I will say the variant is pretty spicy. The other card is Jean Grey, who doesn't really see much play at all. I would avoid this week at all costs. There's so many better weeks, particularly the one just before. This next one coming up is also quite interesting, though, I have to say. It's Mobius rather, not Morbius. This is the final one for the month of September. You will notice that we still don't actually know what this 3rd card is. It's Datamined, right? So of course all of these ones in September are subject to change, but in the Datamined we currently don't know what it is. And again, according to the Datamined, Mobius is going to be going into Series 4, which makes him a very interesting card because you can just spend 3,000 tokens on him rather than opening those Spotlight variants. Kang being one of the cards. Do you really want Kang, mate? Who plays Kang? I play Kang sometimes, but even I admit that he's not really worth going for, as much as I like the card. Your costs can't be increased. This is an ongoing ability. Your opponent's costs can't be reduced. Okay, so Mobius is a really, really interesting card. First and foremost, there's a big question mark over how this works with Wave. If you imagine playing like Mobius on 2, and then Wave on 3, all of your cards potentially will be getting set to 4, whereas your opponent's cards will be getting set to 4 if they're 3 or less. But if they're 5 or 6, they can't get reduced in cost. So theoretically, you could just, you could play like a Doctor Doom, your opponent can't play anything, or you could play an Odin, your opponent can't play anything potentially. The way it works with Wave, I'm not sure about. However, if it works with Wave, the card is just cracked, like insane. However, even if it doesn't work with Wave, it is definitely an interesting tech option as a metacal, similar to how Luke Cage came out of nowhere and was really powerful in the high evolutionary meta. Mobius is going to be really good against a bunch of decks, and it's also got 1 point more than Luke Cage as well. A stat line of 3 for 2 is not so bad. What cards is it good against? Well, Zabu. That's pretty insane. Imagine your opponent snaps on 2 as they play their Zabu and you hit them with the Mobius and suddenly your opponent can't play that Rock Slide on turn 3. That's actually a really, really big deal. The other cards that it's going to impact, Serra is an obvious one. I had a couple others in mind as well, but Zabu and Serra, the most obvious 2 for sure. So should you be opening the Spotlights? I think you probably just want to be spending your 3,000 tokens on Mobius, to be completely fair. This is just like an example of a Wave deck that you could try, maybe with Ramp, because you could play Mobius on 2, Wave on 3, Odin on 4. You could do some weird stuff with it, right? Like, you can really make it awkward for your opponent. If you play Wave, like, later on with Mobius as well, like, without the Electro ramp, you could play Wave on turn 5, like these traditional, like, Death Wave type decks. Your Doctor Doom is going to cost 4 energy, but if your opponent has a Doctor Doom or anything that costs 5 or 6, they're not going to be able to play it. You could play your Doctor Doom and your Jeff, for example, because Jeff is still going to cost 2 because it can't be increased in cost. So Mobius Wave, very interesting. We don't know if it's going to work that way, but just Mobius in general just looks like a really solid card. All right, so to conclude, what should you be doing with your Spotlight caches over the next month and a half? This week, I would avoid. Week of August, spend. If you don't have Nebula and Silk in particular, I think X23 is worth getting hold of. It looks like a fun card. You can play it in a bunch of decks and is pretty powerful. August is avoid, maybe with the one caveat, if you don't own Kitty Pryde and you really, really want her, you could go for it. The month of September is go for it if you don't own Jeff or Ghost Spider, otherwise avoid. The month of September, if Elias is looking interesting to you, you could go for it. I think I'm going to go for it, because September, the rest of them are pretty much avoids. So my top picks next week, August, and then the week of Elias as well, because I do think it looks like a really exciting card. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you disagree with. If you've got any questions, I'm going to be happy to answer your questions in the comments. Please give the video a like if you watched this far. It took a long time to do all the research for this, get all the graphics ready. Big shout out to Drewberry. Also want to shout out Marvel Snap Zone for some really useful articles helping me understand how the hell this system works. That's also going to be in the description if you want to give that a read yourself to clue yourself in a little bit more. Thanks so much. See you on the next one. Bye bye.